Roll20 gets the opportunity now to take out the team that kept them from their rightful spot, or at least Roll20 thinks so, for the Western Clash. That's right, we've got Roll20 versus Team Freedom. Dread, this is going to be an awesome one.
I have a lot to say, I feel like, for this series. And the biggest thing is, I feel like these teams are more alike than at first glance when you look at their story. They are very youthful, both of them coming in. You only have like Glarong plus the other 4 members, formidable names at the time. And then they come in, they qualify for the international, and then they outperform every other North American team. Same thing feels like it happens here for Team Freedom. One of the youngest teams that we have in the entire scene goes in, outperforms absolutely everybody, and they come back. The biggest thing here is Roll20 struggled when they did that. They immediately came back and were beginning to have problems. Does Team Freedom have the same problems that we saw out of Roll20? That coming back from international performance, even though they claim it makes them better, and in the long run it does it actually show immediately after?
Yeah, that has been the big question for me too, is what does Freedom look like after they've come back from their first international event? Because they get to do what teams like Tempo Storm and Gale Force have been able to do, which is get all of that knowledge, bring it back, and improve their region. But sometimes when you get back into the meta that is far different, and obviously it is, given how the meta was in our last series, it can take time to reduce that cognitive dissonance and find your place within the meta. Let's check out the standings and see where both of these teams currently sit, because it's pretty close. Frankly, it's pretty close between all of those top teams. 5-2 tied between Tempo and Team Freedom, and then just below Freedom currently sits Roll20.
I'm really excited to see what Roll20 looks like too. Both of these teams, I'm just like, I am so ready to see how it unfolds, because I feel like Roll20 could come out absolutely dominant. I feel like there's a chance that this is the number 1, 2, and 2 teams in North America right now that we're going to watch. Granted, we have to watch every other team, see what they all look like in part number 2, but there's a very high chance that these are, even though standing-wise they sit down a little bit below. With what Freedom is shown to be able to grow over, and Roll20 claiming that they're still gaining that momentum that they needed to restore after part number 1 and coming back from the midseason brawl.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it too, so let's get right to it. Team Freedom versus Roll20.
Versus Roll20. Last time we played them, we were down 0-2 and we got the reverse sweep. I feel like we weren't as prepared for that series as we could have been, so we're making sure that we're really prepared for this one, especially it being the season opener. I think it's a really big match in terms of momentum, and also I believe a lot of teams are considering like us and Roll20 as the top 2 or near there, because Roll20 had a really strong performance leading up to the Clash, and we had a decent performance at the Clash, so I think this series will definitely set the stage for like the top of NA.
Analyzing at Kiev was really good for me because it let me take a step back from playing the game and just focus solely on thinking about the game, and that gave me a couple new perspectives that like I'm transitioning into my own gameplay. An example of one would be analyzing Schwimpy's gameplay has improved my positioning on all the ranged characters I play by like a huge margin. When we didn't qualify for the Western Clash, it was pretty bad. I'd say we weren't super happy overall, but ultimately our goal is to do well at a major, so BlizzCon is the end goal. So I think it was nice to just sort of take a short break, give us some time to get away from the game and then come back refocused. Team Freedom, I think, is a team that has moments of brilliance and then windows where it looks like they're just struggling. And I think that's largely attributed to the fact that the new roster with the addition of Cure is still trying to develop it. And I think if they do reach a point where the system's in place, they're going to be a really strong team, but I don't think they're quite there yet. Lately, I think my team is super versatile, so if teams target ban anyone on my team, then I think we should be able to just get stronger drafts and win because of that.
Has Team Freedom hit critical mass, or can Roll20 get a victory over them while Team Freedom are still ramping up? Both of these teams have been accused of limited drafting in the past, although Glaurung says if you accuse them of that, it may be in vain. They feel like they are far more versatile, but he even put that back onto Freedom and said that he feels like their lack of ability to adjust in the drafting might be what they're able to abuse in this match.
I think I would have agreed if I did not look at the performance of them at the Western Clash, because when we take what Freedom was able to do at the Western Clash, they drafted exactly how you would expect Team Freedom until everything mattered. And then they said, okay, we are going to accept the fact that maybe we don't have the best understanding of the meta, forfeiting over to the European meta playstyle. And when they ended up playing it, not only did they play it well, like they played it to be able to compete internationally still, showing that for the first time ever, they are willing to take very diverse strategies and be able to execute them nearly as well as the ones that we are known for, like the Stitches Diva out of Team Freedom.
A lot of hype behind this match up at the desk from you guys at home. In fact, we've got a few tweets getting ready for the hype of this match. Here's Collusion, support player for Team Freedom. Finally, we are back for more HGC action. We're playing versus Roll20 eSports in the second set of North America. And for Freedom, this is their only series of the weekend, but tomorrow Roll20 has to go up against Tempo Storm, so they can't have a slump that we generally see from Roll20. They gotta hit the ground running.
They absolutely need to. Here from Marty Hard 85, we have now that HGC is back. We can take a minute to talk about Mage Zuljin at Galarong TV. If anybody didn't get to hear the beautiful rants of Galarong about Mage Zuljin, that was pretty much the hot for him at the Western Clash, constantly talking about when it's going to come out. Maybe. I'm going to say...
It's up to you, Galarong. Make it happen.
With how much hype he had behind it, I wouldn't put it past him. It's rare to see Galarong that enthusiastic about a build in a specific hero.
He did backpedal just slightly, just a little bit. It was like, oh, it's at least fun in Hero League, but maybe we'll reserve that for later on in the HGC. We've got the top 5 cheerers, users cheering for Team Freedom, biggest fans of Team Freedom. Rambo with 23,000 bits cheered, all the way down to Dots Husky at 10K. A lot of Freedom fans.
I was going to say, man, you look at the top there. You can tell who really is committed. My goodness, those cheers almost doubling third place. That is very impressive there. From Joe Space, we have Muranon. Dots Husky following it up there with the 10,000 committed. Gilly, what team have you cheered for the most? That's the real question here.
Ooh, I have to be impartial, so...
You didn't cheer at anybody?
I'm cheering for myself.
Okay.
Up next, we've got Roll20.
That was a really good diversion. You knew I was going to say, so you're saying you don't support HGC?
There you go. See, I do. Just, I'm cheering for Trixler and Trix Wacky Meta. Here's Roll20 top cheers for Roll20. Up at the top, dang, Craters, you love Roll20. That's awesome. Thank you all for cheering and supporting your HGC teams.
Physica Optica, Foxwise, Yipbaz, and Archaea, I'm going to say, as we see trailing down there for Roll20.
You're a braver guy than I am.
You know, it took me about 45 seconds to figure out how to go with the first one, but then after that, we just said, you know, whatever happens, happens. We're going down the line.
It rolled so smoothly, I thought you were just like, no, I can read this right away. I didn't know that you'd been plotting this whole time on talking.
I was like, Physica Optica, what is this? I mean, you know, I can't judge. It's not like my usernames were necessarily, especially for those before the Dreadnought that maybe not many people know. It's not like they were easy to identify. Even my Steam is wild. XXX MLG Aerial God, you know?
Who would have thought? Battleground ready for game number 1. And it is Sky Temple. Not surprising in the least to know Team Freedom is taking us to Sky Temple. We've got bans on Cursed Hollow and Battlefield of Eternity.
Sky Temple has been a map that Team Freedom has prioritized very, very highly. They are so very dominant on it. And to be honest, before the Western Clash, because I feel like there are 2 versions of, you know, Team Freedom, I would say that this is a very brilliant choice for them to move into it. That it is not macro intensive, concentrating on the team fight. But at the Western Clash, they flat out showed they can macro with some of the best in the world, specifically against Team Liquid on this map. And it was a very good series for them, using the rotations and out-cycling the map and giving up objectives they normally wouldn't have. They showed heavy constraint. And really, it's just going to be how much of that is displayed here, because let's be honest, over the past about year and a half, every time North America ventures outward to the rest of the world, we take a bit of taste and we take it in and we enjoy it and we go, you know, this is really amazing what we take here, but when we go back home, it doesn't translate as well.
Now, that is the difference between the 2 metas, and it is maybe one big reason why No Tomorrow were able to get a lot of success earlier on too, is because right after the mid-season brawl, our 2 teams were still figuring things out coming back from the meta. We've got both bans in lock. Roll20 has taken away Kyr's Genji. Dansky's Genji too. We give a lot of hype for Kyr's Genji, but Dansky is right along with them. Team Freedom has banned Ariel, so sticking with the Ariel bans.
Yeah, and that is a bit more of what I expected. So let's see if they high priority into Uther, right? Because this is essentially taking direct translation of the meta that they accepted, and I was alluding to that they forfeited over to later at the Western Clash.
But they didn't do that. They didn't get Uther, and it allows Tassadar through.
It does.
And that is a huge for NA.
It is, absolutely. And I was going to say that Roll20 was the first team to kind of high task. You know, once he fell out after the nerfs, the slight buffs coming in afterwards. There's a lot to say about where Tassadar has fallen, but Roll20 was kind of the first in North America to bust it back out at the top there. So let it through, shows a bit of confidence. We have to be concerning the Tracer if that comes in here before the secondary ban phase on the side of Roll20. But Freedom with an Abathur Greymane comp. We talk about how Abathur can be a bit more risky on a map like Sky, but I do feel like they have enough practice with it on this map that they're going to still put up a really solid argument here.
If Roll20 goes with what they have gone with in the past, they are not afraid to combo a Tassadar and Dahaka on Sky Temple. Dahaka gives them the global, but Uther's still up. They don't want to give the Uther along with Greymane for the 3 seconds of invulnerability, and Garrosh is back.
Garrosh is back, looking to join us here on Sky Temple in the hands of, I'm going to assume that's Glorong, off the top of my head. I
Feeling is Justing?
I feel like
They're going to 2 warrior?
a double warrior. I don't see him repping it up in the front. I assume this is going to be a double warrior, and that would be the off warrior, but I guess that would most likely be Goku coming in then too. I don't know. Either way, we'll figure it out. It's just interesting to see now that it comes online, how high of a priority is it and how continuous it shows for them as a priority, because, I mean, he's been, yes, impactful, but I don't look at Sky Temple as a map where the long, sustaining team fights, yes, they do happen in a tight chokehold, but it's not as tight as you need to be able to rely on being able to get the flip.
Team Freedom knows that Roll20 in the past, one of their highest pick, if not their highest pick hero, it is their highest pick hero, Dahaka, and one of their most successful, 10 out of the 14 games they play, but a last-minute change-up.
Ooh. Interesting to see them make that variable there, because I really like the thought process behind banning out into the Dahaka too. One thing I want to be talking about on this draft specifically, does Illidan show up just because of how impactful he was, and if that at the Western and Eastern Clash, and if now with the composition Freedom have, specifically that Dahaka hover, I was like, they want the Illidan, they're going to be able to really dominate this map, and into a Tassadar typically, you know, I don't know Garrosh straight into an Illidan, but I'm going to assume it's not necessarily the greatest. It's not poor by any means because of his survivability.
With Abathur and Greymane, do you like Illidan better for Cure, or do you think this is maybe telling that they want to get a lot of global presence and get Dahaka as well as Abathur?
I think you go one of two, right? You either all into a Deathball style composition like we already saw projected there for Space Station Gaming and Cursed Hollow the last series, or you go with more of that double global pressure outward. Because the map, I say avoid the double global. It's just not a big enough map unless you already gain a huge lead, which you should never draft assuming you already have a colossal lead. Do you actually gain direct value out of the double global? But they're going to commit with a Brightwing that isn't as telling as if we had seen something else there like that Dahaka priority, but they have left up that last slot. Yeah. Actually, I was going to say to be a Dahaka, but it doesn't have to be with the Brightwing.
No, there's so many different options there. All right, other side of the board, Roll20. Is the Garrosh the primary warrior? Dahaka again still up for Goku.
I hope it's not. I hope this is a primary warrior. I just don't want a Dahaka. Like, that's the last thing I want on the composition for Roll20, just because, I mean, we even got to hear Glorong's thoughts on it. He thinks it's naturally in itself having like the Tass and the Dahaka into the same squad in the rotation, and what that provides to your team, it typically falls off. If you go double warrior with the Tassadar, your hyper carry has to be phenomenal. Granted, there are a lot of good ones still up, but not enough for me to be too afraid of it. Tassadar, or excuse me, Tass Cassia though is one of those hyper carry duos.
Yeah, she is.
Into an Emerald win on the other side though, can you get away with that? I want a double support.
Wait, for Freedom?
Yeah.
You want 2 more supports?
I want as long
Abathur, Murd, and Greymane?
as long as there's just another support to be able to stall out. Like, just don't commit to it unless you Tyrael here, and that's the only way you can make up for it. But if you commit to a non-sustained team fight into a Cassia with the auto attack centric heroes that you already have, and being heroic dependent like the double clone will be with the Greymane moving in. Oh man, Sonya coming out here. Just because you do not win the long sustaining team fights, but you don't win the initial burst either. Because Cassia has enough counter momentum to be able to deal with your auto attack centric heroics.
I thought
so
maybe it would be
commit to the double support, sustain, out trade it, and realize that Cassia Deathball comp, especially into double support Brightwing with Emerald Wind, usually gets a win.
My thought was maybe they would fluctuate into Li Ming, maybe. I mean, you're up against a double warrior, double support. It's going to be pretty hard to get resets, but then at least you're not having to worry about blinds being as big of a problem for her. But then again, you've got Li Ming Greymane, you've got this already pretty squishy composition. You have Abathur too, you only have Murden on the front line, and then you're relying on Brightwing.
The one really cool thing for Roll20 that I hope to see be abused here is that Cassia is one of the better sieging, melees with her overall damage output. She's one of the higher ones to be able to get those trades and group up. Granted, she doesn't have the Ariel behind her like she normally does, but she's got a Cassia. Good, it's not as good, but it's good enough. And into an Abathur comp, you get that pressure out. Try and make sure that you are making sure you are applying the pressure to the front walls, taking out those structures, and getting an advantage over Freedom. Because otherwise, I feel like the Emerald Wind, even though I'm not typically a Brightwing supporter, there's just way too many melees, and Bile and Emerald Wind should just deal with it.
When you say that she is good into the siege, are you referencing or referring to her ability to kill heroes?
It's just
really
mainly like
her
her damage output is above average-ish, considering because she's that weird hybrid of like closer melee range. So, but she's not a full melee, so her auto attack damage is reasonably high. It's not as good as it was when her level 1 affected structures, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing is defending against it, you can't clump because then she chunks everyone. So suddenly it's like she isn't amazing on her own, but she has a lot of cool slight benefits that actually make her above average considering how weak her range is and how non-high her auto attack damage is. Like Stitches kind of does with his hook, right? He's making the zone, makes it a lot harder to be able to defend against, and that accents her, and it's also because she's typically paired with that Ariel, and you just dominate front walls with that hope. So it's a little less effective here, but with the Abathur being so weak, the Brightwing is pretty poor at being able to defend into those things. I want to see them abuse it.
Yeah, the reason why I was asking and wanted to get your clarification on that is because MVP Black had Cassia in their last game and actually had a huge problem with trying to take down structures themselves because you can't blind it. You don't get the 15% extra damage that you normally get to blinded targets to that, but that makes a lot more sense. What do you think about these two drafts? Who are you favoring in this game?
I am going to go with Team Freedom, just because I'm still not directly sold. Garage is still kind of like a win-where I'm not convinced on when I really like or dislike. A heavy melee deathball composition into a Brightwing and Abathur. If Freedom plays it the way that we experienced with them at the Western Clash, they have enough macro understanding now with still great team fight that I think that they've got it.
We're ready to get into game number 1 between Roll20 and Team Freedom. Winner of this is going to get a huge bonus when they start looking at playoffs for BlizzCon. Let's see who gets it.
It's going to be with Freedom here in the blue. We have Collusion representing it there on the Brightwing. Cure is going to be on his Sonya. We have Zugrug repping the Murden. Greymane going to be played by Dansky. And we have Nasmus on the Slug.
Their opponents ready to redeem themselves for not qualifying for the Western Clash. Roll20 Glaurung will be playing Cassia, Justing on the Garrosh. Goku playing his Dahaka, hitting the drags all day long. Prismaticism playing Tassadar, and finally Buds will be playing Uther.
Another thing that makes me, when you're asking the conversation about like what draft and which way do you end up feeling, we see the Tas Dahaka, which normally can be a bit weak when it comes to the damage output overall, unless there's a major hyper carry. And the Cassia generally is that quote-unquote hyper carry, but I view her as strong, a lot stronger, significantly stronger with Ariel compositions than I do without Ariel compositions. So then the next thing I look for is what is another major reason we see Cassia traditionally picked, and that's when there's an auto attack hyper carry composition that I need to stop. And the only real close variable to that, in fact, would be a Greymane, and it's not as auto attack centric, because it's more the clone, not the hat of Greymane that you're worried about.
Yeah, it seems a lot more that the Cassia pick was less about enabling her own team and with the Ariel, and a lot more about when Greymane and inevitably the Greymane clone and even Sonya all dive in at the same time, using that blind, and in that period of time, keeping everybody healthy between the Tastar and the Uther, and then trying to be able to group in on whomever is dragged in, isolated away, or even thrown. We have a different Garrosh build starting off from the Garrosh that we had in the last series, getting unrivaled strength for additional range on that throw of Wrecking Ball, and then additional damage too. I haven't seen that. Again, we didn't get to see the build in Europe earlier today, but I'm pretty sure it was the same one we saw earlier. There is the first instance of the throw.
Zugrug, though, onto the Muradin. He's comfortable with just dropping himself a door toss and moving on out here, scooting away. Shots on top are being traded between the Tassadar Greymane 1 versus 1. Dansky is going to be very comfortable there, especially with the Abathur hat. I'm expecting Adrenal Overload for for Abathur here at the 4 mark. It is going to be the case. I still want to know, does that mean that later at 16, because we didn't see Wazuna, for instance, the last game. Good dodge there from Collusion to make sure he doesn't get pulled. Is just seeing the Abathur Adrenal Overload with the given the axe and the threat that they can put onto the backline, because with Cassia being devoted to stopping the clone, suddenly where do you make up for that lack of damage? And I think that can be done pretty effectively through Muradin. The only problem is that also is relying on auto attacks, which we know Cassia's pretty good against.
And she is, as long as she's moving. She's got that 65 physical armor as the blind drops down. No inner light though, still Ring of the Leech for the self-sustainability, the life leech that Cassia gets on top of blinded enemies. The one that's interesting to me though is Kala's Celerity. Movement speed from Tassadar, and this used to be a favored one in the Korean region, but when it was nerfed, when the movement speed was reduced, we haven't seen it as much, Dread.
I actually really like it. I mean, it's a 5-man melee composition into pretty reasonable CC on the other side of the table, and the biggest thing is going to be the polymorph target for me. If that Tash Shield goes on top of that, being able to make sure that they keep them not only more likely alive, but the mobility afterwards. Because even though Brightwing does end up hitting you with the polymorph, it doesn't change the ability to be able to complement it and give it the mobility away from it. So suddenly you can better run away from the situation. And the biggest thing, though, is every single person, the Cassia, the Dahaka, and the Garrosh, excuse me, are very reliant on making sure they get in auto attack range. And TAS enabling that is going to be a good step.
Well, nice thing for Team Freedom, as Zugrug jumps in, jumps out, is that because they have Sonya, who is a very strong Merker, and they have a couple of those in Sonya and Greymane, they're able to commit more resources to pushing along with their Giants. But Dahaka is coming in, Goku's here, the pull goes on top of Zugrug, But's there for the follow-up after Wrecking Ball. Zugrug, even with the Abathur hat, Dwarf tosses out on top of the Giant Point, mounts up immediately, dismounted so that Roll20 can continue the chase on top of him with the drag. Takes him out.
Oh man, I almost died right there. That was actually extremely impressive in a lot of different ways here. Hold on though, Collusion possibly caught out. Good polymorph use, actually stopping that pull in there for Justing, allowing him to be able to get the escape. First of all, the dwarf toss over the wall, that was very big, but the thing I want to point out is the drag timing coming out from Goku. Not only was it max range, if he waits any longer, he receives the slow on the second half. He's not going to abuse the shrubs to get the mobility to catch up there. It was a then and there situation, and Goku, as always, homing missiles on in, make sure he gets himself a drag. But Roll20 has done a good job of consuming the first couple end of these shots here on the bottom half of the map. But with Freedom's pressure up towards top, it's going to be a winning trade. They get the first 4.
Yeah, the problem with what's happening to Roll20 is they are not ahead in experience. They are against the Abathur composition, and they're getting behind structurally. If Zugrug can deny some of these shots until the rest move in, they have Mule now on Abathur. They'll be able to Mule up, and that forces Roll20 maybe to get more aggressive. Team Freedom are able to do it. They save their fort. They'll back on out. Zugrug has the symbiote, the Carapace, giving him the extra bit of shielding necessary to run back. This fort will be healed right back up unless Roll20 can do something about it.
Yeah, that's, I mean, it's not necessarily a max value, if you will, but I mean, it's perfect. Exactly what you want to do whenever you have a mule on your team. Take a little bit of damage, but never enough for it to be easy for your opponent to move in. Just kill the mule and then kill the fort. It's just right at that threshold, falling below 50 and then healing right back up. Freedom didn't commit many resources down below to be able to stop this. Muradin is waiting in the wayside to be able to zone away from it. Abathur hat going onto the fort to be a deterrent. Even Brightwing coming in with the polymorph. This is, again, just absolute clinic here coming out from Freedom, showing what you need to be able to do with Abathur on Sky Temple to make sure he gets that value. They cannot let this go, and they're going to do their best not to. Also keep in mind, this is a blink heal not going with the Emerald Wind into the composition of Roll20, even with 5 melees.
giving away the ability to split apart the team, to stop the death-balling nature of the composition, and some boss pressure. Wrath of the Berserker's been used, the ball lightning bouncing back and forth. Kira gets thrown into the fray, but runs back and disengages. The drag eventually connects and will spell the doom of Muradin, but the team has kept the fort alive yet again.
Huge adaptation use there to make sure no door toss was available, and the drag right after here. Goku once again securing kills for Roll20 here into this game. And it's just going to be, I don't know, that was a really interesting way how that played out, with Justin opening up with the Garrosh flip and then getting him into a bad position. The pre-cleanse onto the Whirlwind for Cure to be able to survive was not timed fast enough to be able to get that. Suddenly he was in a terrible position, and somebody had to be the victim that ended up going down in the end. It was just the Muradin, but I feel like if that fight opens a little bit different, the Poison Spear connects from Cure, I don't know if it looks that bad. I'm just second-guessing if this is going to be a continuous trend as the game moves on.
Yeah, it did seem like the fighting of Team Freedom was fairly underwhelming in that fight, but I also don't think we had Ultimate Evolution.
Ultimate Evolution was not in use, no. It was only Wrath of the Berserker, I believe, that, other than maybe a Cursed Bullet?
Yeah, I think what happened was Freedom was not fully invested in that fight. It was like, we are going to protect this fort, but we're not going to all in and lose to it. But Roll20 has so many ways of forcing you to fight them, and without an Emerald Wind to disengage, without a Mighty Gust either, there's not really much say that Team Freedom has versus the team fight of Roll20. If you get thrown in with the Wrecking Ball, there is follow-up stuns, there's isolations, there's drags from Dahaka, there's force walls to follow up too. Once Roll20 decides there's a fight happening, Freedom are probably just going to have to say, okay, let's do it then.
Yeah, time to battle. Go head-to-head. Be willing to take that skirmish here. At the end of this altar phase, what do we find ourselves with? The middle fort still stands for Roll20. No Mule to bust that thing back on up. Middle fort did die here for Team Freedom, and top just receiving a bit of poke. So pretty close to even. In the end, Roll20 does have the experience and structure lead for the first time into this game. But that top fort, once that gets sealed, can we really say that confidently? Because they need to open up all three of the forts, not let that Mule get that value back on up, or one shrine phase or altar phase, all it would take, and suddenly Freedom's back in on that structural integrity.
And again, same thing, Roll20 starts to siege in the place where the final fort remains. The nice thing too is, as long as they're keeping the members of Team Freedom here in the top, Dahaka can get a lot of soaking and push up mid, saving that mid fort for another day for some different temple shots, and not giving that experience to Team Freedom.
Ice Block has been picked up at 13, which might be a better tool to be able to help Team Freedom be successful in these team fights. I do wonder if maybe part of the reasoning of, hold on a minute, this is going to be a full-fledged fight. The damage on, but look at the Divine Shield perfectly used. The heal coming out from Glorong, and they are going to be able to turn this around. Cure getting dragged through, beautiful pre-cleanse, but it is too little, too late. Roll20 finds themselves a Cure, and Nasmus not even going to be able to pick up Prismat, or will he? Nope, clutch, shield, and force wall.
That fight wasn't so much a 5v5 team fight as just a bunch of little skirmishes happening everywhere at the same time, but Roll20 gets the better end of the deal, taking out Kier. Now she has Mystical Spear. They're going to go in once again with another Wrecking Ball, but this time Zugrug says, that's fine, we can go in for a fight. Glaurung's getting fairly low. The Into the Fray will help him get back to safety, and there's a lot of armor available to keep them safe through the damage, but at least the fort was saved.
We saw that moment too where that's the first time Zugrug's kind of held the hat for a long while, and he was pretty successful even in that small 3 versus 3 there. That might be something that maybe we would like to see Freedom transition into, because it doesn't, at least so far, look like that they're getting the fights that they want, and so maybe have to rely a bit more onto Zugrug for that DPS. But we'll find out. 10 more seconds and we're going to have the Shrine spawn. Roll20 wants to play as passive as possible until they secure themselves the 16 advantage. Because they have the structure lead, they can sacrifice a few of the shots, and then once that happens, expect them to get full aggro.
Because of that, Freedom hoping that they can step on both of the shrines, but Roll20 at least are going to push them off of the temple in the mid. Up in the top, both Brightwing and Greymane.
It makes sense to commit 2, at least for the Major Guardian. Brightwing can't actually solo the whole shrine comfortably within not lethal range pretty much on her own, but once the first Guardian or second Guardian's down, she's pretty comfortable passive healing it out. I'm not surprised to see that commitment there, but the lack of transition outward here from Freedom is all because of their 16 talents here. They even pulled away from the top shrine for a second, fearful of a rotation. In the end, it looks like it is just going to be a pure trade. Hard to say if this comes out on top for one team or the other. Because the mule factor and ridding of the top 4, I want to lean a bit more towards Roll20, but both teams are fortless at this stage of the game.
Teams also have level 16. Martial Law is the big damage boost. Power Spike for Cassia. Force Wall's been used, but Zugrug dives over it with Dwarf Toss. Goku comes in, Stormbolt stops him from dragging him back to the rest of Roll20.
So, on the note of Garrosh and like his performance throughout today, Justing's iteration is by far the most intimidating of them all. Not only when it comes to how many flips he's managed to be able to get up, it's just the timing of his drags. He's constantly making, it feels like he's making everyone second guess their positioning at all times, almost ETC mosh pit level, right? It's not always necessarily what he's using, but because he has been effective with small trades here and there, suddenly Freedom has to respect him a lot more. And it's making a pretty solid argument here in this game.
I will also say that the team seems far more coordinated with him. The follow-up's always there from Buds. And what do we know about Justing and Buds? When Justing goes in for an engagement, Buds is going to be there for the follow-up. That's just how they work. They've been playing sports, competing together since middle school. So they're playing with that really well. It's also a much different build for Garrosh that he's been focusing a lot more on being able to throw further with Wrecking Ball, and not having the cooldown reduction for his Groundbreaker. He got double up so he can get that huge armor spike when he activates his trait. And between that and Uther, Garrosh is unkillable.
Garrosh seems to be unkillable. Cassia was the one in the last team fight that was able to get the Divine Shield and turn every aspect of the team fight here for Roll20. But they might have to do it again. We've got another altar. It's going to be spawning up on bottom. The members of Team Freedom do beat Roll20 to position, but Roll20 just checking out the boss. Conveniently, those Abathur mines are scouting there for Team Freedom. They have no concern. It's all about this bottom fight. The first true full 5v5 it feels like we're going to get.
Roll20 are maybe unkillable now, but Team Freedom is getting a lot stronger as they level up. Nerves of Steel. There's that poison spear value, goodness.
A lot of damage going out there. Zugrug hit a Stormbolt. Force Wall is going to be laid. Dahaka is still yet to make any movement down here whatsoever. He has got a lot of pressure up into that top lane.
Goku is so patient as a Dahaka player. He won't come down until absolutely necessary when the team is ready to engage. Justing's been caught away from the rest of the team. Divine Shield must be used. Goku stalks in.
And Cure trying to spin to win on the back line. He gets a shielding, but it's not enough to keep him up. Glorong receiving a lot of pressure too, throwing out the blinding light. Nazmus with that clone, he's going to rake himself in. One kill, now 1 for 1 between these teams. Nazmus clone looks like it's going down, but Freedom's winning the fight.
There's the throw from Justing, but Zugrug dives right back in, ready and willing to keep fighting. Dansky goes along with him, Hammer of Justice, hoping that he could slow things down, but Garrosh is not getting away this time. The temple is still up, but so is a boss. Team Freedom to figure out what they want to do. What can they maximize in this time of being able to take out so many members of Roll20?
They're going to move in here to the boss conveniently. As long as they got themselves the Gray Mane, that's the biggest thing. One of the 2 major damage dealers had to keep themselves alive to be able to secure this, and this means there is a lot to be dealt with on the side of Roll20 over the next minute of this game. Between the boss, there's 3/4 of a shrines existing still onto the bottom half of the map, and as long as they don't waste some of the shots onto this keep front wall, it is very, very likely, as in 100% likely, that this keep goes down on bottom.
Giants do. Brightwing takes the shrine.
See, now there's a world where technically you don't get this keep. It's still a freak circumstance, but I just want everybody, when I claimed this 100%, because if you wait, this is going to rid of that first turret 100%, that you get all the shots out of the keep. But now it's got free defensive time. You can bait the zone out. You all clump up on top of it. Tassadar shields come in, and suddenly you got yourself no keep. Math, man. It's a hard thing to do, but in the end of the day, sometimes it gets you a keep.
Aggravating moment for Roll20. Tassadar shields keep it alive. Now Prismaticism just needs to take care of the quad giant pressure behind that. He's doing a pretty good job of that, even soaking up a lot of the attacks.
They're doing their best. Goku even burning the drag. Cure going in, missing the poison spear. And more of a beautiful dodge on the side of Goku than anything.
And look where it forces Team Freedom to be
There's
now.
a flip.
Flips
the stun.
right in.
The taunt. That's it. That's going to be 1.
Good night, Murd, and Nasmus is going to use the clone, but even it gets stopped. Blinded away, Drag pulls in Brightwing, nobody to blink heal to. Collusion falls. 2 major kills for Roll20, and all because Team Freedom were desperate to take that keep down.
They were left for dead. Collusion there. Sad Panda to be, or I guess more of a fairy dragon, but it is a sad day whenever your team just goes, nah, you're dead, mate. You aren't getting out of this. You're just, sorry, we have to let you go. And with those 2 members dead, now Roll20 is looking to make something happen elsewhere. Once again, a beautiful synergy between Justing and Buds. But more importantly, Justing is just making Garrosh look infinite more terrifying than every other version we have seen, at least out of North America.
Yeah, every throw gets some sort of value for Roll20. And the positioning of Team Freedom is absolutely respectful of that. Between Goku with drags and Garrosh with his throws, it is far better at this point to let Roll20 take out this keep than to cause any more staggered deaths. Muradin and Brightwing will be up in 10, and that gives a chance. They're hoping that they could dismount. That's not the case, but there will be a chance somewhere for them to fight. But if they had lost anyone else, if they lost a crucial damage dealer, they would have lost the game.
Now that we have hit the 20 spike, who wins? Like, do you think that one team gained a bigger advantage with the 20 heroics over this fight? Because, I mean, it's going to come down to this top fight. In 10 seconds, we have a potentially game-winning shrine. I feel like the Storm Shield plus the Hive Mind is going to really be a problem for Roll20. But Uther, if Uther's the first to go down, we know how that works. Zugrug gets the taunt combo, gets the cleanse.
Yeah, I was looking at all of them, but I think a huge one too, besides the Storm Shield, is Ignore Pain for Cure. They should be nice and healthy through all this, and Isolation's already gone down on Zugrug. He Dwarf tosses away momentarily, allowing the team to deal with the clone and let him have time to get back. There's another throw. Cure getting stopped from Whirlwinding again, and this time the end of Sonya. Divine Shield still up, and letting Glaurung keep doing damage in the fight.
Zugrug not able to get the Dwarf Toss over that force wall from Prismaticism, and he's throwing out more left and right here. Only 3 members of Team Freedom are still alive. Dansky, go ahead and Morgan for him. He's got one more Q, but you shall not pass. Prismat just constantly being a nuisance there with that level 20 upgrade, and now 3 members dead. Mule or not, Roll20, they want to be able to end this game, and it's very likely they'll be able to do so.
Only Brightwing left on the temples as Roll20 steps toward the core of Team Freedom. A very back and forth game number 1, with Roll20 winning that fateful fight thanks to a couple of wrecking balls from Garrosh. He'll take game number 1 over Team Freedom.
Very well done here, coming out from Roll20 with a, I mean, it's not an uncommon composition, but it is not in every single game do we see that many melee stacked on top of one another, and they made it look good.
You know, you asked about the Storm Tier talents, and really we should have just forgotten all of them except one, and that's Force Barrier. The cooldown reduction when you get to level 20 Force Wall is insane. It is ridiculous.
It's almost,
you cannot disengage.
It's like Illidan Medivh-esque is level of chase. Is like,
yes.
Essentially, you're like, well, can we take this fight? And normally you're like, well, we can test the waters and see if it's a fight we can be successful on, and then maybe we have to sacrifice this wait for later. Those heroes are all ones that kind of go, we don't really care if you feel like you want to test the waters. You either do it or you don't, and if you do, you're going to take the full team fight. And like that Prismat showed it in that last fight. It was just 3, 4 in a row.
And pair it with Garrosh. So now not only do you have a situation where you can stop anybody from disengage if you're testing the waters, but now you are forced to fight and then not allowed. Absolutely no way do you get to disengage now that we have force walls up so freaking often. That was a great combination of abilities and a composition that was well executed from Roll20.
I think one of the cleverest things about that composition when you take another look at it is, well, typically, on any hero that wants to prioritize initiations in a specific way, they really don't like getting initiated on because their kit is designed for that optimal circumstance of getting the drag, getting the flip over. Granted, he's a little bit less problematic as heroes like Stitches can be, but you want to make up for it by hard initiating. And then who's a hero on the other roster as well who's really good at counter initiating if you want to open up? It's Cassia. It's just like if you're going to have a transparent, very clear, yeah, this is how we're taking the fight. She's like, okay, here's a blind. Oh, it turns out you're all dead on top of it. So suddenly both of those stacked on top of one another made it very counterintuitive for any type of team fight for Team Freedom.
I thought Nasmus did a great job with the clone for Freedom too, trying to get some of the ire away when someone needed to leave, like in the final fight when we saw Muradin disengaging. But Kier had a really hard time as Sonya.
Yeah.
The whirlwinds, there was lots of different ways of stopping whirlwinds. You've got Warlord's Challenge, you've got all the stunts. Benediction at 16 too, even though she ramps up at 16, so too does Uther. But we are talking about Garrosh, and we got to ask our players what they thought of Garrosh and where he fits into the HGC meta. Let's see what they said.